What if I told you that your deepest struggles, your most persistent addictions, aren't just happening to you in this lifetime, but are actually echoes from choices you made centuries ago? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. Picture this. It's 1932, the height of the Great Depression. A middle-aged man walks into Edgar Cayce's reading room in Virginia Beach, carrying in his eyes the weight of decades of suffering. He's lost everything, his job, his family, his dignity, all to alcohol. He believes he understands his problem. He thinks it's physical, maybe emotional. But what Edgar Cayce revealed in that trance state would shatter everything this man thought he knew about addiction. Has this ever happened to you? Have you ever wondered why some people seem to struggle with certain vices while others walk away effortlessly? Why do some individuals find themselves trapped in cycles that seem almost impossible to break, as if some invisible force is pulling them back into the same destructive patterns over and over again? What you're about to discover might surprise you, because according to Edgar Cayce, the most documented psychic of all time, addiction isn't just a modern problem of willpower or genetics. It's something far more profound, a spiritual debt that can span multiple lifetimes, creating invisible chains that bind us across centuries. In that pivotal 1932 reading, while America was drowning in economic despair, Cayce uncovered something that would revolutionize how we understand personal struggles. This wasn't just about one man's battle with alcohol. This was about a soul carrying the weight of repeated choices that had harmed not just himself, but hundreds of other people across different incarnations. Stay with me until the end, because what Cayce revealed about the spiritual nature of addiction will challenge everything you thought you knew about personal responsibility, karma, and the journey of the soul. The man sitting before Cayce that day thought he was dealing with a simple case of physical dependency, but the sleeping prophet saw something much deeper, a pattern that had been repeating itself for centuries, a spiritual debt written into the very fabric of this man's soul. Imagine discovering that your current struggles are actually the final chapter of a story that began lifetimes ago, that every time you felt that inexplicable pull towards self-destructive behavior, you weren't just fighting your present-day demons, but battling echoes from past incarnations where you made choices that created ripples of harm through time itself. The most shocking part? Cayce didn't just diagnose the problem. He revealed exactly how this spiritual debt was created, why it manifests the way it does, and most importantly, how it can finally be resolved. What unfolds next will show you how one man's deepest shame became the key to understanding the soul's journey toward redemption, and why breaking free from addiction might actually be about healing wounds that were inflicted centuries before you were born. But this story goes much deeper than one person's struggle. If these deeper spiritual insights resonate with you, subscribe to join our community, exploring the hidden connections between life's challenges and soul evolution. This is where we uncover truths that can transform your understanding of personal struggles. Because when Edgar Cayce went deeper into that trance state, he uncovered a hidden truth that would forever change how we understand the impact of our decisions. He revealed that every single action we take, especially those that interfere with the life and well-being of others, leaves what he called an indelible mark on the soul. This isn't some abstract spiritual concept. It's a very real, energetic imprint that crosses time itself, following us from one incarnation to another, until it's corrected through genuine consciousness and behavioral transformation. Think about that for a moment. Every choice you make today isn't just affecting your current life. It's writing itself into the eternal record of your soul's journey. The man sitting before Cayce was living proof of this universal law. His struggle with alcohol wasn't random bad luck or genetic predisposition. It was the manifestation of what Cayce called soul memory. Those deep inclinations carried forward from other lives that shape our present-day impulses in ways we can't consciously understand. Now, I want to go even deeper into this revelation, because what Cayce discovered about this man's past lives was absolutely mind-blowing. In the psychic reading, he saw that in a previous incarnation, this same soul had been a liquor merchant in a bustling port region. But he wasn't just selling alcohol, he was actively using his influence and position to encourage excessive consumption among sailors, dock workers, and travelers passing through. He was literally profiting from other people's degradation and suffering, watching families torn apart by addiction while his own pockets grew heavier. Can you imagine the weight of that realization? Here was a man destroying his current life through the very substance he had once used to destroy others. The irony was devastating, but according to Cayce, it was also perfectly just. The soul carries these memories and inclinations like invisible programming, creating what seems like an almost inevitable manifestation of past life patterns in our current circumstances and behaviors. The merchant had made his fortune by leading people into the same darkness that was now consuming him. Every bottle sold, every person he encouraged to drink beyond their limits, every family he helped tear apart, all of it was now returning to him through the cosmic law of cause and effect. But this wasn't punishment. In the traditional sense, it was education, a chance for the soul to experience from the inside what it had once inflicted on others. This transformation from perpetrator to victim, from merchant of misery to prisoner of his own creation, represents one of the most profound examples of how our decisions echo across lifetimes. The man before Cayce was essentially living through the consequences of choices made centuries earlier, feeling in his own flesh the pain he had once caused others to feel. But here's where the story becomes truly fascinating, because Cayce didn't stop at revealing the problem. He also showed exactly how this ancient debt could finally be resolved, and the method he prescribed would challenge everything we think we know about redemption and spiritual growth. Write in the comments, "This makes sense to me," if you're starting to see how your own struggles might connect to something deeper than what appears on the surface. The revelations didn't stop there. As Cayce continued to peer into the depths of this man's soul history, he uncovered an even more ancient incarnation that painted an even darker picture of manipulation and control. In this lifetime, the same soul had been a tribal leader in a civilization lost to time, and his methods of maintaining power were particularly insidious. He would deliberately encourage intoxication rituals during important community gatherings, knowing full well that when his people were under the influence, they would make decisions that served his agenda rather than their own best interests. Picture the calculated coldness of this strategy. Here was someone who understood the vulnerability that comes with altered consciousness, and he weaponized it against his own people. He would wait for these ceremonial moments when the tribe needed to make crucial decisions about territory, alliances, or resources, then ensure everyone was sufficiently intoxicated to cloud their judgment. While they thought they were participating in sacred rituals, he was systematically manipulating their minds to consolidate his own power and wealth. The impact of these actions rippled through generations. Families were displaced, resources were misallocated, and entire communities suffered because their leader prioritized his personal gain over their collective well-being. But what makes this story truly extraordinary is how these seemingly separate incarnations were actually connected by an invisible thread that Cayce could perceive with startling clarity. These choices, repeated and reinforced over centuries, created what he described as a connecting thread that crossed time and space, following the soul from one incarnation to another. The tribal leader who manipulated through intoxication became the merchant who profited from addiction, who then became the modern man enslaved by the very substance he had once used to enslave others. Each lifetime built upon the previous one, creating an increasingly complex web of spiritual debt that demanded reparation. The pattern was so deeply ingrained that it had become almost inevitable, manifesting in each new life as an irresistible pull toward the same destructive behaviors. But here's where Cayce's message becomes both sobering and urgent. He warned that ignoring this pattern, pretending it was just a modern psychological issue, would only guarantee its repetition in future incarnations. And each time the soul failed to break free, the manifestation would likely become even more destructive, more consuming, more devastating to both the individual and those around them. This wasn't just about one man's struggle with alcohol anymore. This was about understanding how our deepest challenges are often the culmination of choices made across multiple lifetimes, creating what we might call karmic momentum that propels us towards certain experiences whether we consciously want them or not. The mindset we develop in one life, the decisions we make about how to treat others, the impact we choose to have on the world around us, all of this becomes part of our soul's programming, influencing our inclinations and vulnerabilities in future incarnations. But what made Cayce's approach so revolutionary was that he didn't see this as a hopeless situation. Instead, he viewed it as the ultimate opportunity for transformation, because once you understand the true source of your struggles, you can finally address them at their spiritual root rather than just treating the surface symptoms. Write in the comments, the pattern is breaking, if you're ready to see your challenges as opportunities for deep spiritual transformation. Because what Cayce revealed next fundamentally changed how we should approach any deep personal struggle. He made it crystal clear that the healing process couldn't be merely physical. No amount of abstinence, medications, or willpower alone would truly resolve this man's condition. What was required was something far more profound, a complete moral transformation coupled with dedicated service to others. This wasn't just about stopping the destructive behavior, it was about actively working to balance the damaged energies that had been accumulating across lifetimes. Think about the revolutionary nature of this approach. While conventional medicine focused on treating symptoms, Cayce was addressing the spiritual root cause. He understood that true healing happens when we transform not just our actions, but our entire relationship with how we impact other people's lives. The man before him needed to fundamentally shift his mindset from one that had historically exploited others' vulnerabilities to one that actively sought to heal and protect them. If this completely changed how you see addiction and personal struggles, hit the like button. Your engagement helps this message reach other souls ready for transformation. This brings us to one of the most powerful concepts Cayce ever shared, the universal law of cause and effect operating on a spiritual level. He explained that this isn't some abstract philosophical idea, but a very real energetic principle governing all existence. Each act of indulgence that harms another human being generates energetic consequences that inevitably return to their creator, not through some external force of punishment, but through the natural mechanics of how consciousness itself operates. What makes this so profound is understanding that these consequences aren't arbitrary punishment dealt out by an angry universe. Instead, they serve as the soul's natural learning mechanism, meticulously designed to teach through direct experience of both causing and receiving harm. The merchant who profited from others' addiction had to experience addiction himself. The tribal leader who manipulated through intoxication had to feel the powerlessness of being controlled by a substance. Every person he had harmed, every family he had destroyed, every moment of suffering he had caused, all of it was now being experienced from the inside. This is the hidden truth behind why some struggles feel so intense and seemingly impossible to overcome. They're not just random challenges or genetic predispositions. They're precisely calibrated learning experiences designed to teach us lessons that can only be learned through direct experience. The soul that once caused suffering must now understand that suffering intimately, not as punishment, but as education. But here's where Cayce's message becomes incredibly hopeful. He understood that once you grasp this deeper reality, once you see your struggles as opportunities for spiritual growth rather than random misfortune, everything changes. Your mindset shifts from victim to student, from helpless to empowered. You begin to see that your deepest challenges are actually your greatest teachers, and that the intensity of your struggle often correlates directly with the magnitude of transformation available to you. The journey toward healing becomes not just about personal recovery, but about cosmic rebalancing. Every step toward genuine change, every decision to help rather than harm, every moment of choosing service over selfishness creates positive energy that literally rewrites your soul's trajectory. Write in the comments, "I choose transformation," if you're ready to see your challenges as the universe's way of teaching you exactly what you need to learn for your highest growth. This revelation leads us to one of Cayce's most profound insights about the nature of addiction itself. For certain souls, alcohol isn't just a physical substance that creates chemical dependency. It becomes something far more significant, a condensed symbol of repeated choices across lifetimes that systematically weaken willpower and obscure spiritual clarity. Every time this man reached for a drink, he wasn't just satisfying a physical craving, he was unconsciously reenacting a pattern of decision-making that had been carved into his soul's memory across centuries. Think about how powerful this concept is. The bottle becomes a gateway, not just to altered consciousness, but to a state of being that his soul has experienced countless times before. Each sip connects him to that ancient tribal leader who chose manipulation over leadership, to that merchant who chose profit over compassion. The alcohol itself becomes a physical manifestation of spiritual choices that prioritize immediate gratification over long-term wisdom, personal gain over collective well-being. But what makes this even more profound is understanding how these individual decisions create what Cayce called waves of impact. When someone allows addiction to dominate their life, they're not just harming themselves, they're creating ripples that spread outward, affecting family members, friends, colleagues, and their entire community. A father's addiction impacts his children's sense of security. A mother's struggle affects her family's financial stability. A leader's dependency influences every person under their guidance. Now, I want to reveal something that might completely change how you view personal responsibility. According to Cayce, these waves of impact don't just disappear when the immediate crisis passes. They're actually being recorded on what he called the spiritual plane, creating an energetic record that demands eventual reckoning. Every tear shed by a child because of a parent's addiction, every moment of fear experienced by a spouse, every opportunity lost because of impaired judgment, all of it becomes part of a cosmic accounting system that ensures nothing is ever truly forgotten. This brings us to one of Cayce's most mind-blowing concepts, the Akashic records. He described these as the living memory of the universe itself, a dimension where every thought, word, and action is preserved with absolute precision. Imagine a cosmic library, where your entire soul's journey is documented in perfect detail. Not just what you did, but the impact it had on every person you encountered. The intentions behind your actions, the consequences that rippled out from your decisions, the pain you caused and the healing you facilitated, all of it stored in what we might call the universe's eternal database. For the man sitting before Cayce, this meant that his current struggle with alcohol was connected to a vast network of recorded experiences spanning multiple lifetimes. Every person he had encouraged to drink excessively as a merchant, every community decision he had manipulated as a tribal leader, every family that had suffered because of his actions, all of these experiences were preserved in the Akashic records, creating a spiritual weight that manifested as his present-day addiction. But here's where the story becomes incredibly empowering, because Cayce also revealed that these same records could be rewritten through conscious choice and dedicated service. Write in the comments, "My records are changing," if you're ready to understand how your current decisions are literally rewriting your soul's eternal story. The beauty of what happened next in that reading room reveals the most hopeful aspect of Cayce's entire philosophy. As the man wept silently, absorbing the weight of his spiritual history, Cayce made something absolutely clear. There was no eternal condemnation waiting for him. The universe wasn't designed as a cosmic prison where souls are forever punished for their mistakes. Yes, there was indeed an inevitable need to rebalance the scales, but this rebalancing could happen through conscious effort and dedicated spiritual work, not through endless suffering. This shift in perspective changes everything about how we approach personal transformation. Instead of seeing struggle as evidence of divine punishment or personal failure, we begin to understand it as an invitation to actively participate in cosmic healing. The solution Cayce prescribed was both simple and revolutionary. Immediately begin a path of active service, seeking to help others who were struggling with the same addiction rather than focusing solely on personal abstinence. Can you imagine how radically different this approach was from conventional addiction treatment? While everyone else was telling this man to simply stop drinking and avoid temptation, Cayce was guiding him to seek out people facing the exact same challenge and dedicate himself to their recovery. It was like telling someone afraid of water to become a swimming instructor, or asking someone who'd lost their fortune to become a financial advisor for others in debt. But the genius behind this strategy becomes clear when you understand the spiritual mechanics at work. According to Cayce, each genuine gesture of aid to another human being would function as a partial payment of the accumulated karmic debt. Every time this man helped someone else break free from alcohol, he was literally reducing the spiritual weight he'd been carrying across lifetimes. The energy he invested in healing others created positive momentum that gradually counterbalanced the negative energy he generated through centuries of causing harm. Subscribe if Edgar Cayce's revelations about karmic patterns speak to something deep inside you. This channel brings transformative spiritual content for those ready for genuine growth beyond surface-level teachings. This wasn't just feel-good psychology or motivational speaking. Cayce was describing a precise spiritual technology for transformation. The man who had once profited from others' suffering would now find his greatest fulfillment in alleviating that same suffering. The tribal leader who had manipulated through intoxication would become someone who helped people reclaim their clarity and power. Each person he guided towards sobriety, each family he helped reunite, each moment of hope he created in someone else's life became a concrete step toward his own spiritual liberation. The impact of this approach extends far beyond personal recovery. When someone transforms their deepest wound into their greatest gift, they become a living demonstration that change is possible. Their very existence becomes proof that no matter how deep someone has fallen, no matter how many lifetimes of mistakes they've accumulated, redemption is always within reach through conscious choice and compassionate action. Now I want to explore what made this transformation so powerful, because Cayce revealed that when someone genuinely commits to this path of service, something extraordinary happens that extends far beyond just balancing karmic debt. Write in the comments, "Service heals everything," if you're beginning to see how helping others might be the key to healing your own deepest wounds. What Cayce understood about true redemption was revolutionary and went far beyond anything the religious institutions of his time were teaching. For this man, genuine healing didn't mean simply stopping drinking and returning to his previous life. True redemption meant transforming his entire existence into what Cayce called a living antidote against the evil he had once propagated across multiple lifetimes. Every breath, every decision, every interaction would become an opportunity to create the opposite energy of what he had once generated. Imagine the profound shift in identity this required. The man wasn't just recovering from addiction, he was consciously choosing to become the exact opposite of what his soul had been for centuries. Where he had once encouraged excess, he would now promote moderation. Where he had once profited from others' weakness, he would now invest in their strength. Where he had once manipulated through intoxication, he would now guide people toward clarity and empowerment. But what made this transformation truly extraordinary was the spiritual framework Cayce provided for understanding it. In one of the most profound statements ever recorded in his readings, he said something that completely redefined the relationship between divine love and spiritual growth. The spirit doesn't seek perfection to be accepted by God. It seeks perfection because it has already been touched by Him. Think about the revolutionary nature of this insight. Most spiritual traditions teach that we must earn divine love through good behavior. That we're fundamentally flawed beings trying to prove our worthiness to an external authority. But Cayce revealed the opposite. We're already loved, already connected to the divine, and our drive toward perfection isn't about earning acceptance, but about expressing the divine nature that's already within us. This changes everything about how we approach personal transformation. We're not struggling to become worthy. We're remembering who we've always been beneath the layers of accumulated pain and misguided choices. The journey becomes one of uncovering rather than earning, of remembering rather than achieving. Now, I want to reveal something that explains why this man's addiction felt so overwhelming and seemingly impossible to overcome. According to Cayce, addiction often serves as an escape from much older pain that sometimes doesn't even belong to the current life. What this man was experiencing wasn't just the stress of modern existence or genetic predisposition. He was unconsciously trying to numb echoes of memories from past incarnations, fragments of experiences his conscious mind couldn't access, but his soul remembered with devastating clarity. Picture carrying the emotional residue of being responsible for countless people's suffering across multiple lifetimes. Imagine the weight of remembering, even unconsciously, the faces of families destroyed by your actions, the communities manipulated through your influence, the trust betrayed for personal gain. These memories don't disappear when we die. They become part of our soul's emotional landscape, creating an inexplicable void that many people try to fill with substances, behaviors, or relationships that promise temporary relief. The hidden truth behind seemingly inexplicable addictions often lies in this ancient pain that our conscious minds can't understand, but our hearts feel intensely. The alcohol wasn't just numbing present-day stress, it was providing temporary relief from centuries of accumulated guilt, shame, and spiritual anguish. Write in the comments, "I'm healing ancient wounds," if you're starting to understand that your struggles might be connected to pain that's much older and deeper than this lifetime. This explains why some people are born with what feels like an inexplicable void inside them, a sense of emptiness that no amount of success, relationships, or achievements can fill. According to Cayce, certain souls carry traumas from past incarnations so intense that upon being reborn, they arrive in this world already carrying emotional wounds that have nothing to do with their current circumstances. These ancient traumas shape emotions and decisions unconsciously, creating behaviors and cravings that seem to come from nowhere but feel absolutely overwhelming. The man before Cayce was experiencing exactly this phenomenon. His desperate need for alcohol wasn't just about escaping present-day pressures or genetic predisposition. The substance was functioning as anesthesia for his soul, temporarily muffling the inner call to face unresolved issues from previous lifetimes and confront spiritual challenges he wasn't even consciously aware of carrying. Think about how this reframes our entire understanding of addiction and compulsive behavior. When someone reaches for a substance or engages in self-destructive patterns, they might unconsciously be trying to silence an inner voice that's urging them to remember, to face, to heal something that happened centuries ago. The alcohol becomes a way to avoid the spiritual work that their soul knows needs to be done, creating a cycle where the very thing they use for relief actually prevents them from accessing the healing they desperately need. If you felt that recognition when we talked about pain being a messenger, when content resonates with your soul's truth, your like helps these teachings find others who need them. But here's where Cayce's approach becomes truly transformative. He helped people understand that this pain, this inexplicable void, this seemingly endless craving wasn't their enemy. Instead, it was serving as a messenger, carrying crucial information about their spiritual development and pointing toward exactly what needed to be healed for their soul's evolution. The breakthrough in healing begins when someone finally accepts the invitation to look within and recognizes that their pain isn't random suffering or divine punishment, but intelligent guidance, designed to lead them toward wholeness. Every moment of craving becomes an opportunity to ask deeper questions. What is my soul trying to tell me? What unresolved experience is seeking attention? What ancient wound is ready to be healed? This shift in mindset transforms the entire journey from victimhood to empowerment. Instead of seeing addiction as evidence of personal weakness or moral failure, we begin to understand it as our soul's way of ensuring we finally address issues that have been carried forward from lifetime to lifetime. The intensity of the struggle often corresponds directly to the importance of the lesson and the magnitude of transformation available once we're willing to face what we've been avoiding. The decisions we make in these moments of choice between numbing and facing, between avoiding and embracing, literally determine whether we'll continue carrying these burdens into future lifetimes or finally release them through conscious healing work. Now, I want to explore what Cayce discovered about the spiritual mechanics behind this healing process, because what he revealed about the energetic shifts that occur during genuine recovery will completely change how you view personal transformation. Write in the comments, "My pain has purpose," if you're ready to see your struggles as messengers guiding you toward exactly what your soul needs to heal. What Cayce discovered about the energetic mechanics behind addiction reveals why breaking free can feel so incredibly difficult, but also why the transformation once achieved becomes so powerful. He explained that each time someone surrenders to addiction, they're not just making a poor choice in that moment. They're actually reinforcing what he called a vibrational mark that systematically weakens their capacity for connection with higher energies. Think of it like tuning a radio to a lower frequency. The more you reinforce that setting, the harder it becomes to access the higher stations that carry wisdom, clarity, and spiritual guidance. This creates what we might call spiritual distance from divine sources. The person finds themselves increasingly cut off from their own inner wisdom, their natural intuition, and their ability to feel connected to something greater than themselves. They become trapped in a vibrational prison of their own making, where each drink, each surrender to compulsion, makes it harder to access the very spiritual resources they need to break free. But here's where Cayce's perspective becomes truly revolutionary. He revealed that for certain souls, this struggle with addiction isn't actually a mistake or a sign of spiritual failure. Instead, it's part of what he called a learning contract that was assumed before incarnating. These souls specifically chose to experience this challenge because their journey through addiction and recovery would serve a much larger purpose, becoming an example and beacon of hope for countless others facing the same battle. This completely reframes the entire experience. Instead of seeing addiction as evidence of personal weakness or divine punishment, we begin to understand it as a form of spiritual service. These individuals volunteer on a soul level to walk through the darkest valleys of human experience so they can later guide others toward the light. Their struggle becomes a gift to humanity, demonstrating that no matter how deep someone falls, redemption and transformation are always possible. The impact of this perspective extends far beyond personal healing. When someone understands that their battle with addiction might actually be serving a higher purpose, it transforms their relationship with their struggle. They begin to see themselves not as victims, but as spiritual warriors engaged in important work that will ultimately benefit many others. And this is where the journey becomes truly extraordinary. According to Cayce, individuals who successfully overcome decades of dependency and then dedicate their lives to helping others break free experience what he called immense acceleration in their spiritual evolution. The combination of personal transformation and selfless service creates a kind of spiritual momentum that can advance a soul's development by centuries or even millennia in a single lifetime. The man who had once profited from others' addiction could potentially become one of the greatest healers of addiction in human history. His deep understanding of both the darkness and the light, his intimate knowledge of the struggle, and his genuine commitment to service would make him uniquely qualified to reach people that others couldn't help. Now, I want to explore what happens on the spiritual plane during this transformation, because Cayce revealed some absolutely mind-blowing information about how this healing work literally rewrites the cosmic records of our existence. Write in the comments, "I'm ready to serve," if you're beginning to see how your struggles might be preparing you to help others in ways you never imagined possible. What happens next in the spiritual realm during this transformation process is absolutely extraordinary. According to Cayce, each sincere act of help that this man performed wouldn't just benefit the person he was assisting, it would actually rewrite the Akashic records themselves. Think about the profound implications of this. Every time he guided someone away from alcohol, every family he helped reunite, every moment of hope he created in another person's life was literally replacing the cosmic records of destruction with records of reconstruction and positive contribution to humanity. This isn't just metaphorical language. Cayce was describing a precise spiritual technology where conscious acts of service create new energetic imprints that overwrite previous negative patterns stored in the universe's memory banks. The man's soul signature was being transformed from that of someone who caused suffering to someone who alleviated it. His entire spiritual identity was being rewritten through the accumulation of compassionate actions. But there's another dimension to this story that reveals why breaking free from addiction can feel like such an intense battle, and it has to do with what happens during moments of intoxication itself. Cayce explained that when someone is under the influence of alcohol, their energetic field becomes vulnerable in ways that most people never realize. The protective barriers that normally shield our consciousness become weakened, allowing spiritual entities with lower vibrations to approach and actually influence thoughts and behaviors. This revelation completely changes how we understand the nature of addiction. What feels like internal compulsion might actually involve external spiritual influences that attach themselves during moments of vulnerability. These entities, drawn to the energy of intoxication, can create what Cayce called negative spiritual bonds that persist far beyond the immediate effects of the substance. Even more disturbing, these connections can remain active across lifetimes, explaining why some addictive patterns feel so inexplicably powerful and seem to come from nowhere. This transforms addiction from simply an internal psychological issue into a constant spiritual battle involving influences that exist beyond our normal perception. The person struggling with dependency isn't just fighting their own impulses. They're engaged in spiritual warfare against entities that benefit from keeping them trapped in cycles of self-destruction. Understanding this hidden dimension explains why traditional approaches focused solely on willpower or chemical intervention often fall short. The battle extends into realms that psychology and medicine don't typically address. The person needs not just physical sobriety and emotional healing, but spiritual protection and energetic cleansing to break free from influences that may have been attached to their energy field for decades or even centuries. Now, I want to reveal what Cayce prescribed as the most powerful defense against these spiritual influences, because his solution involves practices that not only break these negative bonds, but actually transform the person into someone these lower entities can no longer approach or affect. Write in the comments, "I claim my spiritual protection," if you're ready to understand how to shield yourself from influences that may be operating beyond your conscious awareness. The solution Cayce prescribed for breaking these spiritual bonds was both practical and profound. He recommended that breaking free from these cycles required establishing daily practices of prayer, meditation, and altruistic service as non-negotiable elements of recovery. But these weren't just feel-good activities or religious obligations. According to Cayce, these practices functioned as spiritual technology, systematically strengthening the person's energy field and reducing their vulnerability to external spiritual influences that fed on lower vibrational states. Prayer, in Cayce's understanding, wasn't about begging for divine intervention, but about establishing conscious communication with higher spiritual forces that could provide protection and guidance. Meditation created moments of inner stillness where the person could distinguish between their authentic thoughts and external influences that might be affecting their decision-making. Altruistic service raised their vibrational frequency to levels where negative entities simply couldn't maintain their attachment. Think about the genius behind this approach. Instead of just telling someone to resist temptation through willpower alone, Cayce was providing a complete system for spiritual transformation that addressed the root causes operating in dimensions most people never consider. The daily disciplines weren't punishment or penance. They were tools for literally changing the person's energetic signature. This brings us to one of Cayce's most empowering revelations about human potential. He explained that with consistent spiritual discipline, it becomes possible to completely change what he called the soul's vibrational tuning. Just like adjusting a radio to receive different stations, a person could shift their consciousness to frequencies that naturally attracted different experiences, relationships, and opportunities aligned with higher levels of awareness and spiritual development. The man who had been trapped in cycles of destruction could actually retune his entire existence to attract healing, wisdom, and opportunities for service. His energy field would begin resonating at frequencies that drew mentors, fellow travelers on the spiritual path, and situations that supported his continued growth rather than his downfall. But perhaps the most profound aspect of Cayce's teaching involved what he called proportional redemption. True repentance, he explained, wasn't about feeling sorry for past mistakes or making promises to do better. It involved creating positive impact that actually surpassed the harm that had been caused across lifetimes. The redemption available to any soul was directly proportional to the intensity and constancy of their transformative work in service to others. This meant that someone who had caused tremendous suffering across multiple incarnations also had the potential for tremendous healing and spiritual advancement. The depth of their fall could become the height of their rise if they were willing to match their previous destructive impact with an even greater commitment to constructive action. Now, I want to explore what Cayce revealed about the specific timeline for this transformation and why the intensity of someone's addiction often correlates directly with the magnitude of spiritual mission they're being prepared to fulfill. Write in the comments, "I'm tuning to higher frequencies," if you're ready to understand how your daily choices are literally changing your spiritual radio station. The directive Cayce gave to this man became one of the most powerful principles for understanding karmic balance ever recorded. If in another life you led many to the bottom of the pit, in this life, lead many to the light. This wasn't just poetic language or motivational speaking. Cayce was describing a precise spiritual equation where the magnitude of someone's potential positive impact directly corresponds to the depth of harm they had previously caused across lifetimes. This principle explains why some people seem destined for extraordinary missions of healing and service. The souls who carry the heaviest burdens of past life destruction often possess the greatest capacity for present life transformation. Their intimate knowledge of darkness makes them uniquely qualified to guide others toward the light. The man before Cayce wasn't just recovering from addiction. He was being prepared for a spiritual mission that could impact thousands of lives. But what makes this transformation even more urgent is understanding what happens to addicted souls who don't break free in this lifetime. According to Cayce, addiction doesn't simply end with physical death. The consciousness maintains exactly the same desires and tendencies after the transition, but now faces an even more torturous situation. On the spiritual plane, these souls find themselves trapped in what Cayce called a vibrational prison, where they remain connected to the same destructive patterns that dominated their physical existence. Picture the absolute horror of this condition. The spirit experiences insatiable thirst and profound anguish because there's no physical body available to satisfy the impulses that have become central to their identity. They hover around bars, parties, and places where alcohol is consumed, desperately trying to absorb sensations they can no longer physically experience. This creates a state of perpetual craving without any possibility of satisfaction, an eternal torture of wanting what can never again be obtained. Cayce described encountering spirits who had been trapped in this condition for decades or even centuries, unable to move forward in their spiritual development because they remained energetically bound to earthly addictions. They become what he called earthbound souls, neither fully alive nor fully transitioned, existing in a twilight realm of endless unfulfilled desire. This revelation makes the work of breaking free in this lifetime absolutely critical. Every day someone remains trapped in addiction. They're not just damaging their current existence, they're potentially setting themselves up for an afterlife of unimaginable suffering. The stakes extend far beyond physical health, family relationships, or career success. This is about the eternal trajectory of the soul itself. The journey toward liberation becomes a race against time, not just for this lifetime, but for the soul's entire evolutionary path. The transformation required isn't just about stopping destructive behavior. It's about fundamentally rewiring the consciousness so completely that these patterns lose their grip across all dimensions of existence. Now I want to explore what Cayce revealed about the spiritual assistance available to souls trapped in this condition, because even in the darkest circumstances, he discovered pathways to redemption that operate beyond what most people ever imagine possible. Write in the comments, "My soul chooses freedom," if you're understanding that your recovery isn't just about this lifetime, but about breaking patterns that could trap you across multiple dimensions of existence. Even in the darkest circumstances, Cayce discovered that the universe operates with infinite compassion and wisdom. He revealed that in the spiritual world, there actually exist what he called recovery houses, specifically designed for souls struggling with addictions. These aren't physical institutions, but spiritual dimensions where trapped spirits receive assistance and guidance from more evolved beings who help them gradually regain self-control and break free from the vibrational prisons they've created for themselves. These spiritual rehabilitation centers operate on principles of gradual healing, where souls learn to redirect their consciousness away from earthly cravings toward higher forms of fulfillment and purpose. The process can take what we would consider centuries, but time operates differently on the spiritual plane. What matters isn't the duration, but the genuine internal decision to change, often aided by sincere prayers from loved ones still on earth, or intervention by spiritual guides who specialize in addiction recovery. What makes this entire system even more profound is understanding how souls use these experiences for accelerated learning through what Cayce called role exchange. He observed that souls often reincarnate in completely different positions to understand the full consequences of their actions from every possible angle through direct, visceral experience. The man who had been the liquor merchant might return in another lifetime as the child of an alcoholic parent, experiencing firsthand the family trauma he had once contributed to creating. This role reversal isn't cosmic punishment, but spiritual education of the most intensive kind. The soul that once caused suffering must experience that suffering intimately, not to be tortured, but to develop genuine empathy and wisdom that can only come through direct experience. A tribal leader who manipulated through intoxication might reincarnate as someone vulnerable to manipulation, learning what it feels like to have their power stripped away by someone they trusted. This understanding transforms how we view our current struggles. That inexplicable pain you've carried, that sense of being victimized in ways that seem disproportionate to your current life circumstances, might actually be your soul experiencing the other side of patterns you once perpetrated. The intensity of your current challenges often reflects the magnitude of learning your soul is committed to achieving. But here's where the journey becomes truly empowering. Cayce emphasized that breaking these ancient cycles requires what he called complete life reorientation towards serving a higher purpose. This means establishing daily practices of prayer, consistent service to others, physical purification through clean living, regular meditation, and most importantly, dedicating your existence to something greater than personal satisfaction or material success. The transformation isn't just about stopping destructive behavior, it's about becoming someone these negative patterns can no longer touch because your entire vibrational frequency has shifted to dimensions where such influences simply cannot operate. Most profound of all is understanding that each choice you make for light instead of shadow literally writes a new page in your soul's eternal history. Every small effort, every moment of choosing service over selfishness, every decision to face pain rather than numb it, creates lasting impact that echoes across all past and future existences. Write in the comments, "I'm rewriting my eternal story," if you're ready to understand that your daily choices are literally editing the cosmic record of your soul's journey. If you've stayed with me through this entire journey into Edgar Cayce's profound revelations about addiction and spiritual debt, then something deep inside you recognizes the truth in what we've explored together. This isn't just another video about recovery or self-help. This is about understanding the eternal nature of your soul's journey and how your current struggles might be the very experiences that transform you into exactly who you're meant to become. The fact that you're here right now, absorbing these concepts about karmic patterns, spiritual transformation, and the possibility of rewriting your soul's eternal story, tells me you're ready for the kind of deep spiritual work that most people aren't prepared to face. You're among those rare individuals willing to look beyond surface-level explanations and embrace the profound responsibility that comes with understanding how your choices echo across lifetimes. This channel exists to bring you exactly this kind of transformative content, the hidden spiritual teachings that can fundamentally change how you see yourself, your challenges, and your potential for extraordinary growth. If these insights resonate with something deep in your soul, I'd love for you to subscribe and become part of this community of spiritual seekers who are committed to breaking ancient patterns and stepping into their highest purpose. Leave a comment saying, "This message was meant for me," if you made it all the way to the end, and feel that inner knowing that this information arrived in your life at exactly the right moment. I read every single comment, and there's something powerful about declaring your readiness for transformation in a space where others are walking the same path. If this conversation created that sense of recognition, that feeling of pieces clicking into place, hit the like button to let me know this content is serving its purpose of reaching the souls who need to hear it most. There's a video right here that complements this topic perfectly. It explores how Edgar Cayce revealed the specific spiritual practices that can accelerate your soul's evolution and break generational patterns in this lifetime. Click and continue with me over there, because your transformation is just beginning.